More than anything else from that day, I recall the rain. The kind that screams through the sky was not the stormy kind. It was steady and silent, even harsh in its composure. The rain infiltrates your bones without your permission. I was in the executive conference room of Harrison Industries, the business that my family has owned since the beginning, our so-called legacy. I had recently graduated from business school, turned 22, and was ready to make a name for myself. However, I didn't feel confident in my abilities at the time. My life was on the verge of disintegration. My father slapped a heavy pile of papers onto the shiny table. With his voice resonating off the glass walls, he spat. Incompetent. Are you aware of the potential consequences of your error for us? My voice got stuck somewhere between my throat and my heart as I attempted to speak. I can fix it, Dad. The agreement is not yet final. Repair it? That voice. The voice belonged to Michael, my brother. His laugh was piercing, low, and condescending. Emma, you almost sold our shipping section for half its worth. Mistakes like that can have serious consequences. Even though I could feel the heat building behind my eyes, I resisted the want to cry. I refrained from crying in this particular location. I wasn't in their presence. They were discussing a deal I had written which involved selling one of our smaller businesses, Harrison Maritime. I had made use of old value numbers. Yes, I made a mistake, but I recognized it before I executed it. Nothing went wrong. However, a mistake wasn't a lesson in this household. The penalty was death. After saying, I trusted you with this, my father's disappointment and silence hurt more than the shouting. This is what you give me after you had one chance to show yourself? To explain, I opened my mouth. Regarding the 80-hour work weeks, I had to strike a balance between that commitment and another last-minute tech purchase they threw onto my desk. I realized the deal was irrelevant. Results were all that counted in the Harrison household. People who didn't belong were excused. Behind me, the door opened. With her immaculate hair, immaculate Chanel suit, and unreadable expression, my mother took over. She stated plainly, "The board is waiting." My dad straightened his necktie. "I'll finish this later." It was a place where life-altering decisions were made by generations of Harrison men. That room transformed my life that night. Without even raising his head from his desk, he declared, "You're done here." I gasped, "What?" "The board is no longer confident. Your employment has been terminated," with immediate effect. Someone seemed to have stolen the room's air. "Please, Dad, there was just one mistake," he said. "A mistake we can't afford. You'll get severance pay for 6 months. You're on your own after that." I tried to discover anything human in his eyes as I stared at him. "You're letting me go? I am your daughter." At last, he raised his head. His face remained stern. "This is precisely the reason why it hurts more. Emma, you're a Harrison. You also failed." I heard heels clicking behind me. I heard my mother's calm, collected voice. "We have made arrangements for you to work in Seattle at your uncle's company. This incident won't adversely affect the family due to the distance." Stunned, I turned to her. "Do you wish for me to depart from New York?" She responded. "Want is not related to it. Your flight departs tomorrow." And if I decline, my dad's voice grew softer, more difficult. "Thereafter, you leave with nothing. No severance, no relationships, no assistance. You will be entirely on your own." Harrison did it that way, chilly, calculated, brutal. Staring at the people who had reared me and once told me I could be anything, I stood there. And for only one error, they were now interrupting me. "One," I whispered to myself. "There's an option." That night, only my grandfather, Thomas Harrison, defended me. As I was leaving, he rushed into the study with a thunderous roar. "You idiot, Jack," he snarled at my dad. "You don't know what you're discarding." My father, however, remained steadfast. "The board has previously decided." "The board?" Grandpa gave a sarcastic laugh. "Which individuals do you label as yes men?" Then his face softened as he turned to face me. "Come stay with me, Emma. We'll make this right." However, I was unable to. I wasn't ready to let go just yet. "This guilt is consuming me." "No, Grandpa," I muttered. "They made a decision. I did the same. I left behind the only life I had ever known that night. However, I was unaware at the time. My narrative wasn't over yet. It was only the beginning they had written. That night, I arrived at a modest hotel with just my laptop, a suitcase, and a 6-month severance payout that suddenly felt more like hush money than assistance. I refrained from crying. I believed I would. When I was by myself, I expected to collapse, but instead I perched on the edge of the thick flowered bedspread and stared blankly and numbly at my laptop screen. I got the contract open. They said that one person, the only one, had destroyed everything. I became aware of it at that point. There was something wrong. No, the figures were incorrect. It was the formatting, though. The typeface, the distance, the way some paragraphs are phrased. I didn't own it. I was aware of my style, but it appeared to be my work just near enough to pass. I was aware of my writing style. Additionally, this. It wasn't this. A shiver ran down my back. I opened my personal backup drive and found the original file. I had saved the original file the night before everything collapsed. The contrast screamed at me side by side. I made just enough minor adjustments to ruin the deal. Just enough to give the impression that I was inept. Someone had manipulated my work. I went cold. I couldn't stop thinking about that day. I was struck by the arrogant expression on Michael's face, the way he had been prepared, so eager to take the lead, so quick to criticize me. This is what he did. He desired that I leave. He also made sure to hold me accountable. The rain obscured the city lights as I gazed out the hotel window. I was ill. I nearly believed them, not because of what they had done. I had nearly come to terms with the fact that I was the failure they said I was. Now, though, I was aware of the truth now. At that moment, my phone began to buzz. My grandfather sent me a message. Emma, nothing is as it seems. Observe. Hold on. Learn. It wasn't long, unclear, traditional grandpa. The explanation provided was sufficient. With my fingers shaking but steady enough to type, I sat up straight. I preserved every digital trace I could locate and every copy of the contract. I began to jot down notes. I jotted down a chronology, names, and suspicions. I also made a promise to myself. I wouldn't disappear. I wouldn't dash to Seattle to hide like a branded failure in the corner of someone else's workplace. No. Did they really want me gone? All right. I would go. However, I would be observing, studying, making plans. Because if Michael believed that my tale ended with his treachery, he had yet to read the final chapter. It's a long time, 10 years. Long enough for your heart to be rotted by bitterness. Or long enough to transform it into something more dangerous, intelligent, and keen. I went with the latter. I spent the first year creating a peaceful, modest, and purposeful existence that they would never have imagined. I set up Phoenix Maritime Solutions, a tiny consultancy business in Boston. I set up a simple website, a small office, and created just enough noise to give the impression that I had moved on. However, what happens behind the scenes? I was observing everything. I read each and every Harrison Industries news release, each purchase. I have heard all the rumors from the shipping industry. And, always, Grandpa's silent texts. Observe the Singapore route. Pay close attention to the terms of the Anderson merger. They're going too far. Permit them. He never gave me instructions. He simply handed me the parts of the puzzle, one by one. And until I saw the complete picture, I examined them. Instead of leaving a lasting legacy, Michael was accumulating a wealth of information. He was pursuing news stories, making grandiose offers, utilizing resources he didn't comprehend. I am particularly interested in the maritime division. The irony was that, because there was a clause hidden deep within the original contract, the one I had written, the technical jargon buried the clause so deeply that even the board's legal team had overlooked it. See subsection B of clause 23.4. It said that I, as the initial signatory, would have the first right of refusal on all Pacific Rim shipping routes and related infrastructure in the event that Harrison Maritime was restructured. Currently, a detail so minor and unimportant my granddad, however, was aware. And what about the day Michael unavoidably ruined the family business? The crucial part would be that clause. This is the secret to everything, so I waited. I also worked. Phoenix Maritime intentionally remained tiny. Specialty logistics contracts that no one else wanted to undertake included supply chain emergencies, port reconstructions, and challenging routes. I selected each worker, gave them competitive pay, and made loyalty a non negotiable requirement. Nobody was aware that I was a Harrison. Not even my close friends and family can truly understand me. Behind my back, Michael was the recipient of the last person I trusted with my true name. I rapidly discovered that trust was not a gift in the business world. There was a chance. I refused to take it again. My parents continued to send those required Christmas cards in the meantime. They included fake autographs and generic gold foil, you know the kind. They included a note expressing how wonderfully Michael was progressing every year. In what ways was Harrison Industries thriving under his leadership? I never answered. However, I kept each card. I put them in a folder that I named Inspiration. Suddenly, 10 years had gone by. My business developed into something genuine, solid, and well respected. Despite their unknown status, they possess money, connections, and an incalculable power. Just make money. What about Michael? The fissures were beginning to appear: late payments, canceled contracts. Legal quiet has buried a few lawsuits. However, I did see them. I witnessed everything. And I was aware of. Time was drawing near. Nearly. It began with an unexpected phone call. I received no support from my relatives. No. They continued to act as though I didn't exist. It came from the attorney for my grandfather. She said softly, "Your grandfather's health is deteriorating. He has requested to see you." I left everything behind and made the 3-hour drive through pouring rain to a peaceful home outside the city, where he had sought refuge after withdrawing from the spotlight. He was thinner than I remembered, but his eyes were still piercing and stubborn when I discovered him in a bright room. "It's almost time, Emma," he croaked, beckoning me nearer. He gave me a hefty, leather-bound folder that bore his initials. There were documents within agreements, receipts, and emails. The dirt of 10 years has left its mark. Michael's dubious debts are a matter of concern. The actual books used to fabricate quarterly reports for Harrison Industries, as well as a list of shell corporations that are used to conceal failing businesses. Keeping score was something my granddad had done, carefully. He smirked and added, "Your brother used paper to build his empire. Mine was based on reality." I made sure someone understood the difference. In startled stillness, I sat there. Then he leaned forward and met my eyes. "Do you recall that part of your contract?" I did, of course. Section 23.4, Section B. I buried it in the technical jargon, the one I penned. Michael didn't even notice it. "It's about to activate," he said in a gravelly voice. "The maritime segment is undergoing a restructure. They are selling the Pacific routes." I blinked. He went on, "They don't have the liquidity to survive. You should intervene before they make that deal. You carry out your clause. You assume command." I took a deep breath. "You're not kidding." With a faint smile, he remarked, "I've never been more serious. Your brother is facing financial difficulties. To receive what is rightfully yours, simply attending will suffice." I didn't see him alive after that. A few weeks later, he died. The paper stated that he passed away peacefully. He hung on long enough to give me the last weapon, but I knew the truth. And now? It was my time now. The funeral was frigid, professional, and excruciatingly theatrical, everything you would expect from the Harrisons. Michael's eulogy focused on legacy. My mother's tears were soft and suitable for the camera. As if it were a networking event, my father shook hands with business associates. I was in the rear, not visible, not welcome. It won't last long, though, because a week later, a letter was sent to all of the board directors, family members, and significant shareholders. The last will and testament of Thomas Harrison is to be read in full, in person, with no proxies. Attendance is mandatory. They were still unaware of it, but things were going to change. I dressed intentionally on the morning of the will reading. Gray, charcoal suit. I am wearing a silk blouse. The heels were sharp enough to cut through all of their lies. I wasn't entering as the girl they threw out 10 years prior. While they used borrowed authority to pretend to be emperors, I was entering as the lady who had quietly constructed an empire. Power doesn't wait, which is why I was there 5 minutes early. All talk ceased as the elevator doors opened onto the upper floor of Caldwell and Associates. My dad dropped his cup of coffee. My mom's face turned white. And my handsome golden boy brother, Michael, he appeared to have seen a ghost. I said, "Hello, family," as I entered the room completely. Should we start? There were many people in the meeting room. Advisors, attorneys, and board members arrived in anticipation of a feast, but they didn't realize they were the ones receiving the food. After adjusting his glasses, Mr. Caldwell, my grandfather's longtime lawyer, started reading. To Michael, my grandson. Michael sat up straight, prepared to receive kudos. I leave you with these wise words: without knowledge, power is like a ship without a rudder. Quiet. Caldwell went on. You tried to get control, but never understood how the business operated. Instead of pursuing foundations, you pursued headlines. The hardest part is that to advance, you betrayed your sister. The room was filled with gasps. My mom's mouth fell open. With bewildered, dark eyes, my father leaned forward. Michael leaped to his feet. This is absurd, Caldwell said without flinching. Sit down. We haven't finished yet. He produced a second document, the one I was familiar with. 10 years ago, the company purposefully changed a contract to defame Emma Harrison and force her to leave. I have the original document here, along with evidence of who made the changes. The color faded from Michael's face. My dad appeared to be on the verge of fainting. Caldwell added, there was a provision in the original contract that is now legally enforceable. He faced me. Emma, I got up. Calmly, I responded. Clause 23.4, subsection B. In the event of a restructuring, it gives me the first right of refusal on all Pacific Rim shipping routes. I raised my phone. Michael revealed the Singapore agreement last week. It has to be reorganized, which implies, I concluded, you need my approval. You won't get it either. The room blew up. Members of the board hurried to review contracts. Telephones rang. Voices arose. Now my mother's mascara was streaking, and she was shedding actual tears. I wasn't finished, though. Caldwell opened one more envelope. Today, Emma Harrison becomes the sole owner of Thomas Harrison's majority stake in Harrison Industries. With immediate effect, she has all voting rights related to the Harrison Family Trust. I looked around the room. I raised my voice over the confusion and declared, I'm not here for retribution. I'm here to claim what was rightfully mine all along. Stunned, Michael sank into his chair. My father gazed down at his hands as if they had lost their identity. And me? They attempted to rob me, but I left the room with the company. However, I wasn't done yet. The incident was not merely an aggressive takeover. It was a checkmate. Harrison Industries was no longer theirs the day following the will reading. I owned it. I was explicit about that from the very first board meeting. I walked into the conference room where my father had dismissed me a decade earlier. This time, though, I wasn't the gullible girl pleading for attention. The CEO was me. Michael used to sit at the head of the table while I stood there and looked about. That guarded suspicion was still visible in the eyes of some of the board members. They waited for me to make a mistake. I grinned. I started, let me be clear, it's not a rebranding. The present is a new beginning. I slid the Phoenix plan, a binder, across the table. It contained the comprehensive restructuring plan that my grandfather and I had worked on for years. It described a future based on efficiency, sustainability, and international collaborations. It was a plan that truly recognized the market we were in. I said, the shipping division will be absorbed by Phoenix Maritime. The first will take immediate command of all Pacific Rim operations. Someone attempted to object. I held up a hand. This cannot be disputed. We're merging on my terms. I stopped, then went on. Your former leadership team allowed 3 significant contracts to expire, but we have already secured them. International clients are asking for quick talks, and my government partners are awaiting confirmation. All I needed to know was that they were silent. This business had been suffering beneath Michael's glitzy exterior, and now they noticed it. They were aware now. The vote was unanimous at the conclusion of the meeting. Emma Harrison is the majority shareholder, chairwoman, and CEO. With that, phase 1 was finished. The journalists went crazy. Fired Harris returns to take the throne. Emma Harrison's stunning corporate takeover. From disgraced to CEO, the comeback story of the decade. They flooded in with phone calls, interviews on television. These features are tailored specifically for businesses, requests to give talks at conferences. Previously unresponsive investors now pleaded for a meeting. I didn't do it for them, though. I did it for the girl who had been degraded. I was the one who, armed only with a suitcase and a clause no one had read, bravely left the building in the rain. I was now creating something better with a purpose, not merely retaliation. I brought in the quiet soldiers who had stood with me. I provided respect, real positions, and real power. Michael attempted to file a lawsuit. Within days, his case fell apart. My dad attempted to bargain for a position on the board. Instead, I gave him a framed copy of my initial letter of termination. My mom sent flowers. Without leaving a message, I returned them. I didn't have to say sorry. I required outcomes, and I had them for the first time in a decade. I watched the city awaken 1 month after I took over at my grandfather's former office, which is now mine. The skyline below me was alive with activity. The business they attempted to steal from me was already changing behind me. Harrison Enterprises? I completed the name. We changed our name to Harrison plus Phoenix, a combination of rebirth and heritage. It was more than simply a symbol. It was a declaration, expansion, combination, renewal. Within 30 days, our first public project was launched, a dedication to sustainability for each division, an employee profit-sharing scheme, a scholarship for young women in business, named after my grandfather. The effort went beyond simply managing a business. It was about demonstrating that privilege and ancestry were not the sources of strength. It resulted from perseverance. Michael was no longer in the spotlight. Rumors circulated that he had left the country due to numerous blacklist placements. My dad quietly retired. There was no formal farewell tour, there was only silence. What about my mom? She wrote another letter, written by hand. Sadistic nostalgia. Perhaps we were mistaken. Perhaps you were always the future. I didn't respond. The intention was not to rebuild certain bridges. However, what legacy do I leave behind? And that was only the beginning. To introduce the new brand, we hosted a meeting for the entire organization. The auditorium was packed with more than 700 workers. When I walked on stage, the same folks who had previously feared the Harrison name stood and cheered. They were this army of doers, intellectuals, and dreamers, and I gazed out at them. I began by stating, 10 years ago, someone told me I didn't belong. I refused to believe that, which is why I stand here today. Cheers. Actual. Earned. This business is no longer solely focused on metrics. People are the focus. Purpose is key. It also has to do with the fire you start when someone tries to extinguish you. My voice remained steady. My hands remained steady as I was no longer surviving. I was in the lead. I went back to my art studio that evening. Even after the takeover, I held on to that one. For everything around me, including everything, had been constructed from ashes. And I had done it without ever becoming like them, without pleading, without seeking retribution. A year later, I was standing in the open air, light, and glass courtyard of our recently constructed headquarters. It didn't resemble the dark, leather-lined boardrooms of our previous headquarters. It had a living quality. Behind me was our mission wall, which bore a straightforward quotation from my grandfather: "Power is acquired via comprehension and maintained via honesty." I set a sculpture beneath it. I created one myself. The melted brass of my office door nameplate was used to make it. There is a phoenix emerging from shattered glass, steel, and metal fragments, a reminder that something that was once damaged could be transformed into something much more exquisite. We had a secret party that night. No media. There was not a single headline to be found. Only those who were important were included. My group. This is my family of choice. Operations Rebecca held up a glass. To Emma, the CEO who created a blueprint out of her exile. Cheers and laughter ensued, but all I could do was smile. I realized in my heart that this story had never really been about getting even. I had indeed been deceived. The expulsion had indeed occurred. I didn't simply return to triumph, though. I returned to get dressed, to alter the perception of leadership, to demonstrate that women may be powerful without imitating broken men's power maneuvers. I wanted to remind the world that conviction, vision, and patience were also weapons. I still have my grandfather's last letter, folded in his will, in my desk drawer. I would occasionally pull it out and read the paragraph that had stuck with me. The Queen just has the most freedom. She's not the loudest piece on the board. My mother sent me a farewell email, but I never replied. I didn't give my dad another call. Michael, too? He vanished into the background, serving as a reminder of the price of having too much ambition. The Harrison story did not include me. Thus, I composed a fresh one. I still occasionally stroll through the deserted hallways after everyone has left. I touch the gleaming conference table with my hand. My gesture is a silent homage to the girl who used to stand here, trembling, terrified, and alone, not out of nostalgia. She received justice in a boardroom. She built justice piece by piece. And now, all of the things they used to undermine me. This is the foundation upon which I stand. This is not done with malice. I am not here to exact revenge. However, even when no one else understood me, I knew who I was. That's how this narrative really ends. It's not about the acquisition. It was not the news reports that caught my attention. I cannot bear even the destruction of my betrayed people. What is the actual conclusion? Is tranquility, the kind that results from creating a reality that reflects your value rather than waiting for others to recognize it. Emma Harrison is my name. Furthermore, I was never merely a Harrison. It was I who emerged from the blaze, and I didn't turn around. Have you ever had the feeling that your family has betrayed you? Similar to Emma? Would you choose to forgive them or leave them permanently if you were in her position? Leave a comment below with your opinions. Your tale can be just what someone else needs to hear today, so you never know. And if Emma's experience reminded you of yourself in any way, remember to sign up for the channel. I'll share another inspiring tale with you every week. It's about overcoming heartbreak and discovering how to make new decisions for yourself.